Happy Friday, and we are live here. I am your host, Chris. And today we have Danielle. We're going to be talking about some custom events. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. And apparently, I've decided that today you are plurality, so we can just have fun with that for the rest of the time. I don't know.
Yeah, it's all good. I can be multiple people.
I know, it's great.
Uh, and you too. Yeah, we're just going to really have a wild time over here.
Oh, yeah,
Build
it's
our
going to
own
be
audience.
spectacular. It's
Yeah.
going to be so much fun as we start diving into playing with custom event mapping and, you know, tinkering a little bit more with the webhooks feature that recently got launched and we started playing with.
Yeah. So in our last live stream together, we discovered the webhooks, had no idea where
Mm-hmm.
it came from. And we've since then kind of dug in and played around with them a little bit and tried to think about some of the use cases. And interestingly, across all of the various accounts that you and I have access to, it's like in one, but not in another, but it's not a beta. So we have no idea how you could get into it. But we have access. So we're going to show you what we've been playing with and see how far we get.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. And shout out to Maggie. Thank you so much for helping us out with this and even help, like playing along with the unboxing. It's been a lot of fun, and hopefully we can kind of find some more things to play around with.
Yeah, so let's set the stage on this. So in our prep conversation, we brainstormed all these different ways that you might want to use a webhook. And in our unboxing video, we talked a little bit about how you could have some other platforms sort of just shoot at that information back into HubSpot. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's still the case. But if you are building your own SaaS and you're building your own software, then you may not actually want to build webhooks into that because webhooks are slightly less secure. They're kind of, HubSpot even labels this option as low code. So if you're already doing that development work, then you might as well take the next step and have those events sent in via API. And
Mm-hmm.
that's existed for a long time. It's pretty straightforward to use. All the documentation is fantastic and it's like really easy to test and make sense of. So we were like, okay, well, if you're not going to build it into your own software to send webhooks, then how are you going to use webhooks?
Right.
uh, and sort of the use case that we landed on to try and build, and that's what we're going to do today is build this live, was if you have a case where your company needs to send hardware as part of the solution. I have a client where they are running a service on hardware, and I've worked for another company that did that as well. And so they really need the hardware to be shipped and delivered before they can finish their onboarding and getting started process. So knowing when that hardware has at least been shipped, if not delivered, from whatever shipping solution you're using and getting that into HubSpot is pretty key.
Mm-hmm.
And so we found our way into a free trial of ShipStation, which is, the top Google result when you look for shipping solutions. So it seems
We
like pretty
we
reasonable.
clearly put so much effort into planning and preparing and everything there. So yeah, it works
Yeah.
great.
I will say I looked at Pirate Ship because I've used Pirate Ship personally.
Yep.
And they don't have an API. I didn't dig any further than that, but it made me think that they don't even connect to like Zapier. I don't think they have a native integration with HubSpot. So if you're using Pirate Ship, good luck. But if you're using ShipStation, we're going to show you how this works. So I'm going to share my screen.
Exactly. And while Danielle's getting all set up there, just additional use cases for just kind of what we're talking about here is it's really focused on anything that would be not SaaS based. So whenever you ship, like we use the example of shipping hardware, but shipping in general is a perfect example. Or I can see scenarios where you might want to incorporate this with human resources and onboarding, but
Mhm.
anything that isn't specifically technology related but not software driven is probably a use case when you want to be setting these event triggers so that you're able to see when things that are offline actually happen.
Right. Or in other platforms. And that
Yes.
was what we kept running into in our brainstorming session and prep for this, where it was like, well, if you could do that, you would do it this other way. And like we've figured out all these workarounds up to this point. And I kept coming back to like, well, you could just do that with Zapier. But what's interesting is I found, and we'll see this together in the screen share in a minute, is that Zapier does let you post a lot of things in HubSpot.
Mm-hmm.
But interestingly, their support for custom events is only in creating custom events, not sending custom event completions, which are very different things.
Oh yeah.
So I was like, oh, it's useless. Like Zapier can do this for you. And then I was like, wait a minute. So we are going to go ahead and do that. So I've got up ShipStation here. I'm going to go ahead and create a new manual order here. We are going to put in lots of fun dummy data.
Yep. Yeah. Ultimately, while this data is being added, the main focus and kind of the process we're going to be looking to set up here is threefold. So first of all, it's going to be setting up ShipStation, which we've already done for the basic trial, but that's really all you want to. You want to make sure you have a platform like this put into play. We're entering the order, and then we're going to be setting up the webhook on the ShipStation side of things, as well as the receiving side on HubSpot. And then we're also going to do a Zapier setup to just make sure that all the data that we want to exchange is being passed accordingly.
Yeah. So I just created
now that we have the order created.
Yeah, I just created it, added all of our dummy data here. It doesn't like our address, but that doesn't matter too much because the easiest thing to trigger, just for the sake of this demo, is an order created, because then we don't need to go through any of the other ShipStation steps to send some data through. So we've got our order. Then we need to go to our Zap and build that out. So Zapier has this lovely AI where it asks you what you want to automate. And we found that it works really well. So we want to say, when an order is created in ShipStation, send a webhook to HubSpot.
Yep.
And once we have,
I just want to make a note just on like the prompt engineering side of things. There is that it's really important to keep your action very specific, very to the point, and it tends to be most effective when you do this in a chunking format. And what I mean by that is, if you want to have like 4 or 5 steps within your Zap, that's fine, but build them one at a time. So if this, then that, if that, then the other thing, instead of trying to do all 3 of those steps at the same time, because otherwise it's going to probably give you a lot more of a headache.
That's a great tip. I honestly haven't used Zapier all that much because I've done so much within the HubSpot ecosystem that I haven't really had a need for it. But yeah, that prompt engineering is great advice.
Yeah.
So
and
we
you
got
only need a free. You don't even need to pay for Zapier to do this. Like, you can do this on an entirely free account. So that's not
true.
One key thing.
Because remember, the webhooks, to send a webhook is a pro feature.
That's right. I stand corrected. I forgot we updated to the demo for it. So yes, I stand corrected. You do need to have a paid Zapier account for this.
Yep. Just for the Zapier piece of it, though, I'm sure there are other tools out there that may already be part of your tech stack that can send a webhook, but we'll show you what some of those limitations are. When we first started this brainstorming process and trying to solve for this use case, we went into ShipStation partially because they can send their own webhook. ShipStation, you can just tell it to send a webhook, but the information that it sends out in the webhook is fixed. You can't edit it. And it sends 2 properties that don't map to anything in HubSpot, even if you get your custom event set up. Custom events can and should be associated with an object, which means that you need a unique identifier to link that object to the custom event completion. And where ShipStation was just sending out, it was like resource URL and resource number or something like that. Like, we didn't even really have context for what it was. So we couldn't map that to anything. We couldn't have ShipStation go directly into HubSpot. So that's where we landed on Zapier, where we could define what comes through in the webhook. So we could pull different pieces in from that order in ShipStation, which we're going to take a look at right now, and then tell it what to push into HubSpot. So here we've got our trigger that's new order thanks to their AI builder. We're going to continue. I've already got my ShipStation account linked to Zapier here.
We're not restricted. If you didn't have at that point, the first step you'll need to do is essentially log into your ShipStation account. But again, since we already have that plugged in, that's not something you need to worry about right now.
Yeah, so we're going to grab our order C, which is Donald Duck here that we just created. And so you can see all of this information that's available to you to build into and reference for any subsequent steps. So now that we know that's working, we're just going to go ahead with that. So now we have to build our webhook. I talked a little bit about the HubSpot connection to custom events. So if we do HubSpot and then we look in here, we can look for events. And as you see, we've got creates a custom enterprise event, which is, I'm actually not even sure if that's a custom event. I think it is. Or is it like a marketing event?
Yeah, it's the custom event. The labeling in Zapier for this has been like, it's a little confusing, but you want to choose usually that first option, not the engagement.
Well, and this one we're assuming, we didn't test this all the way through, but we're assuming it actually goes and creates a custom event itself. It doesn't post the completion of that custom event. So instead of posting the completion and being able to track that in your journey reporting and, you know, roll up reporting on what people are doing or when things are happening and triggering workflows off of that, you'll actually be creating the shell that should be accepting that information with this Zap. So you need to be really careful in understanding what it's doing. So we know we don't want to do that. I'm sure there's a way that we could create some custom action. We haven't played with that, but generally speaking, because we're here to test webhooks, we went ahead and enabled the webhook option. So HubSpot is actually not a part of this Zap at all. We're just kind of creating this message flow that's like shooting it out and hoping HubSpot can accept it. But we set that up in this webhook. So when you go into HubSpot to create your custom event, we do have one there, but we're going to build a new one. We have these options, and this is the setup webhooks that we discovered. You can see it's labeled low code before you select it. And then we go ahead. So here we're going to do ShipStation order placed. It's going to be associated with contacts, but you can see all of the standard objects are available here. Do we have any custom objects in this portal? I don't think we do.
No, we haven't built any custom objects in this portal. We just use the defaults.
I think you can reference custom objects with these as well.
Yes, you can for reference. If you are on an enterprise account and you're building custom objects, you can absolutely reference them. We just do not have that configured for the sake of demo purposes in this portal.
Yeah. But once you get all that filled out, you go to the next step, you get a webhook URL. That is what Zapier is going to push into. And so we just grab that, come back into Zapier, and this URL in the webhook step, we'll paste it right into there. And then we were testing this yesterday with JSON. I'm sure most of these would work. But because I don't want it to be read as a form, I'm putting it in as JSON because I don't know how that works. So I'm making some assumptions here. And then the data is where you create that mapping to the properties in HubSpot, or what will become the properties for your custom event. So in our case, we might want to do something like order ID, and then we go reference that from our step in ShipStation that pulled in our test. We got an item ID and an order ID. Then we'll add a value. One thing you have to do is link that unique identifier. So you'll need email or a contact ID. Obviously, email is going to be the easiest thing to map across multiple platforms. And so you have to make sure that you add that in order for this to possibly work. Customer email. Oh, I didn't include one there. When we push through our next event, I'll make sure I include the email so we can link it up. So right now, that's all I'm going to push through, because you'll find that as you go through the setup for this custom event, you have to have all of those properties mapped ahead of time for HubSpot to be able to receive it. And I'll save any further explanation on that for when we get into it. But the rest of this, good to go. You can leave it pretty much blank, especially for the sake of this demo. If you're really building this out for a process that you're running in your business, I'm sure you'll have a much bigger scope of things that you need to track and pull through. But a lot of that mapping happens in that data step. So we continue. All looks good. It's grabbing order ID. My test didn't have an email, so we're going to test it. It's right there. That ID matches what we have in here at the end of the webhook URL, CANBW8 L or I. It's a good idea to keep track of that and make sure that those match, because you will find if you sit in this step for too long, it actually generates a new URL. So
We
if you are,
discovered that yesterday.
yep. So if you're spending a lot of time building this out and working through that data mapping, make sure you come back and double check that the end of this webhook URL, the CANBW, that matches the ID that you're posting to in Zapier.
Yeah.
So
And
it
it
looks
might just be a good
generally
idea for
fine.
best practices just to leave that webhook step just for last, and essentially do everything you want to build within Zapier as well as ShipStation. Once that's all set up, ready to go, hop into HubSpot, get the URL, drop it, launch it, and here you go.
Yeah. So now we've come back into HubSpot to finish it. It needs a test event to move ahead. So you need to have that Zapier piece somewhat built out to push a test event in and then be able to progress to the next step. Otherwise, you get stuck on this step. So you have to like have these different tabs and windows open in tandem so that you can piece it all together as you go. So we'll hit next. Because my test didn't have an email in it, it's not going to show me, and that actually might mess up this whole thing, but we'll go through that and see what happens. It won't be able to link it to the contact object. So these will just exist as like anonymous event completions because it was blank in my test. So we're going to go ahead next. And here is where you put that together. You can see it's required. And if we choose order ID and pretend like that's actually going to work, even though we know it won't, it will let us complete this. And then one of the challenges that we found was you actually can't edit the properties in here. So in some of the other webhook types, you can add additional properties after you create it and edit the properties that exist after you create it. For some reason, in this view, you cannot. So if you create your webhook and realize, or create your webhook custom event and realize that your test didn't have an email, like we just saw, I now have to go create a new custom event from scratch to make sure that I can map through that email property and link it all together. So that is one big limitation that we've found with this. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to take a second and go create another order that has an email address so that we can push that through, create another custom event and test it that way. And then we'll see what the outcome is if it works, which I don't have a whole lot of faith in due to our testing yesterday, but we're going to see if today it's cooperating.
Yep, that's the goal, and I'm glad that was called out for making those property updates, because I know it can be very frustrating to spend a lot of time building something only to have it not work because you need to make one minor edit. And so just not being able to do that, like that's something that really want to be clear for you to kind of keep in mind, and really just make sure it's fully set up, at least right now, and we can adapt that later. And it's no, we'll see how that gets fixed and go from there. But as you can see here, like we're now entering in this new order ID, and we have an email account associated to it, which some poor person who has that email, which I'm sure exists, is now going to get some kind of a notification about an order, which is totally fine for our webhook testing.
I think I did actually turn off those settings so it doesn't send any emails.
Oh yeah, that's right. We did do that.
Hopefully.
That's what it's yes.
Just for the sake of testing. But yeah, so we're creating a new manual order that exists now, which means we can go grab that test in here. Actually, it should have just run. Let's go look at the Zap runs because it's turned on. We found that it takes a minute. 12:20, that's it.
Oh, and there you go. You'll notice that all those lights turned green. That shows that the thing's playing nicely with us, which is great. And when we're looking at that post, looks like the data is coming through that we wanted to come through.
Yep. So when we set up our webhook, we only mapped the order ID and email. Of course, in our last test, that was empty. So now that would have tried to post to this custom event, but because it didn't have email mapped properly, it's not going to work. So let's go back and create one more custom event. We'll change the webhook URL that Zapier is posting to, and go from there.
Yeah. And just noting that is just, again, if you're making these minute changes, you're probably going to need some kind of a naming convention so you can manage version control. And that's just a good recommendation to kind of keep in mind in general, is that whenever you're building tools like this, use a naming convention system. It doesn't matter how you like what that naming convention system is, in all honesty, as long as it's consistent and your whole team is using the same version, because that's what drives your ability to just remember what this is and which version you should be using. So now that we've made those modifications and the updates accordingly, we're gonna run through the test event again and see what happens.
I think I have to create another order to run it through.
I think you're right.
Mm-hmm. We're gonna go through all the Disney characters today.
I wonder if I can duplicate an order.
Since my kids are obsessed with Frozen,
Hey, no
Elsa
complaints
is
there.
going to get a new widget from us. All right.
And we want to make sure we add the email as well, because otherwise it's not going to work.
Thank you.
Because for whatever reason, that's not a required property in ShipStation, which I don't understand. It seems like it should be, but it's not.
Thanks for that reminder.
And now we have that new order with all the data that we need. And
okay, so now it should have run. We'll see that it hit V2, 1223. Yep, that's it.
That looks like it.
We can see it posted. Oh, I spelled that wrong. Oh, well. Okay, so now we can see that our test event came through. We'll go through this mapping exercise again. These are text. Order number is technically a number, but I don't want HubSpot to think about it as a number. So here is where we're going to match up the object record unique ID. We're grabbing email because we have it this time, and it's pushing through to email. So now we should be able to create one more order and see if our webhook works end to end. So when an order is placed in ShipStation, Zapier runs it through, pushes the webhook to HubSpot. And in theory, HubSpot's custom event here, this V2 that we created, will have an event completion here. So that should change to 1, but we will see if that works.
Oh, yeah.
Bryan, I'm going to need you to dig up another Disney character for me.
We're so close. Let's go with Cusco. Cusco-topia time.
How do you spell that? Is it?
C-U-Z-C-O, I believe.
All right. Florida. All right, we're going to have an email. Add our line item. All right, so there's our order. Hitting save order is going to kick off our Zap. So we will watch that come through. We've got that here. It was done. Awesome. Does it hit our completion in HubSpot?
Refresh. Let's see. Hopefully it does.
It hasn't yet. And this is what we were finding in our testing yesterday. I did shut off that Zap, but I don't think any of these really came through that we were testing. So I don't know what's wrong because we saw the Zap run. We mapped everything in HubSpot and kept it like pretty bare minimum. I do know in using custom events in other like real world contexts, if you have empty properties that are mapped and like there's a null value, sometimes it throws an error up. But usually it will just take whatever you give it, like through the API completion endpoint. So we kind of thought through that a little bit, couldn't quite figure it out. I can't see any logs in here. So I can't really figure out what is failing. Whereas if you're pushing through the API, you've obviously got the code that comes back to tell you if it's successful or not, and it usually gives an explanation. In this case, because it's low code, you just don't have visibility to that. There's no logs that we could dig into here. There's no way that we can figure out what failed, because we saw like everything up until the point where it's pushing it over to HubSpot worked. We got lots of green check marks and we saw it all come through several times. So one of the limitations I think we have with this solution is that the visibility just isn't quite there for you to troubleshoot it. And not being able to edit properties is a big complaint that I have here. So I would love to learn more about maybe where some things are getting developed on this or where we might go look for those logs. But I also would love to hear from our audience, like, how do you see this webhook solution coming into play? How would you use this? Because Bryan and I sat there for an hour trying to think through, what would you even do? Well, how do you want to use this? And I think this shipping example was a great example for me. And we even kind of talked through it a little bit. At Inbound last year, they announced the extensibility into HubSpot where you could create custom React cards on the contact records, which is awesome if you wanted to like build ShipStation in HubSpot and like manage your order creation or your order fulfillment within HubSpot using that external tool and leveraging, a sort of visible connection. But the limitation you have in that is that it's not actually writing any information into HubSpot. So you still need to have a solution like this where, sure, you can create it in HubSpot, but you need to have like all of that running in the background to have it come back into HubSpot and tell you that that thing is done. You need to like create the structure for that. So I think this is a strong real world use case if you could get it working right. But I couldn't honestly think of that many other use cases for this one.
Yeah, and I will acknowledge it, just for a lot of the industries that we tend to work with, is that it's just not something that is applicable, and so I will acknowledge that there's a lot of bias there. And for those of you who might be in like CPG or manufacturing, you'd be like, well, I mean, I can use this every single way this week. And in that case, like, please tell us. Like, we would love to know that information so we can build examples according to you, and exactly where we're at. So, yeah,
we want to know what else we should build. I think this is a really cool way to bring it back to our theme of the show in Workspaces, like linking your workspaces together, especially an example where you've got like a software and hardware combo, and they need to have the hardware in hand. Like, that's really giving your team a unified workspace, a unified place where they can find information to like get a whole picture of the customer that they're working with. So I think it will be really cool. And I love where the custom events are going. There's so many exciting things coming out with it. I think this one's just got to get a little more attention and love before we can really make it do cool things. And then please tell us how you want to use it. Bryan and I will try and build it for you just for fun. So
exactly. Yeah, we like doing this. We like doing this stuff for fun. Again, we spent, like Danielle said, like over
an hour and a half.
Actually, like we say an hour, but I think it was more like 2 hours yesterday.
Yeah.
Just like completely coming up with use cases for this and just demoing things around. So yeah, anything we can get is like, it's fantastic. It allows us to kind of help solve a problem for you as well, and can go from there. And theoretically, when we do this here in a week or two, everything's going to be kind of squared away. But if not, we're going to continue to build and play and iterate, because that's ultimately what this is all about. It's a real great time when we're able to solve problems, and honestly, I would argue probably even a better time when we're able to discover potential problems, because that allows us to fix things that you may not even know.
Yeah, I know. I'm really happy that I got to do this in kind of a test environment and figure it out first. But yeah, love custom events. Lots of different ways that you can use them. I would love to learn more ways that people imagine they could leverage this webhook custom event. I don't know how to get it. It just appeared in your account. So maybe there's a beta coming. Maybe there's just a new feature update that will get dropped in pretty soon. But we'll see what kind of buzz there is around it in a couple weeks at Inbound.
Yeah, we will. But other than that, yeah, thank you so much for the time today, Danielle. And thank you everyone who tuned in. Definitely appreciate thought, time, and insight. So it's been a great day. I know we're wrapping up a week, but we will catch you here. At least I know I'll be online again doing one of these on Monday. So I'll enjoy your weekend all and keep building and have a good one.
See ya.